Welcome to episode 18 of Created by Design. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the bits and pieces that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to do a real quick catch up on the 3 pairs of socks. You've kind of seen me working on these over the last couple of episodes. These were the all wool socks that I am wearing around the house, even in the summertime when in the evening time my feet get cold. And so these socks already have a little bit of Rusty's hair on them. That's our little rat terrier. Just makes them a little warmer, I guess. But I do wear these, and so they seem to be working. I don't know that I'd want to wear that all wool sock, this particular one, inside of a shoe or a boot. I think wearing it around the house like I do is probably the perfect thing. I had this pair finished last time we talked, and I kind of am saving them back. They may end up as a gift, so I'm just going to kind of stockpile a few of my socks, and this is the last one completed, and I think these turned out really well. I love the kind of sophisticated little design. They would be fun little socks for around the house, or they're great to, they have a good fit to them, and I'm a size right at it, about size 7, and so I did a pretty good job of getting them to fit me. And once again, you've heard me talk about how much I love the sweet tomato heel and this terrific cast off up at the top that adds a little elasticity. So you don't have to worry when you bind off from a toe up sock. Sometimes the binding off can get a little too tight. And so I learned this terrific new cast off that has a yarn over in it. And it just seems to solve that cast off that could get too tight. So I'm going to just start a little treasure box of socks, and we'll see what happens to them. But I've enjoyed making these. I'm going to be making more. And I made several pairs a couple of years ago, and I have leftover yarn. So now this is my leftover sock yarn, and there's not enough of any one of these colors singularly to make a sock, but there's definitely enough to combine together to get maybe 2 pairs of socks, one for sure. So you always have, unless you're making a sock that goes halfway up to the knee. I don't make a tall sock, so I always have yarn left over, but it doesn't go to waste because these colors will fit in well together in another pair of socks. So that's for another day, but I'll get back to these socks. Right now I am finishing up the wrap. I didn't bring it to show you today, that I've been knitting on. I'm getting close. Next episode I'll show you that. It's the gray, variegated gray shawl. And so I've been... So what's been really in my thought process this last couple of weeks is just more thoughts about making memories, and making memories with our families, our grandkids. Maybe it's somebody else's child that you've bonded with, and how important my memories with my grandparents have been. And both of my grandmothers sewed. They did different kinds of sewing from each other, but I can remember receiving things from my grandmothers, and I cherished them, and I just thought what a valuable memory to have, is having parents or grandparents that have made something for you specifically, and just thinking about how important those memories are in my life. I think one of the things that we see today, that because we're all so busy, that so much of what we have gets bought from Target or someplace like that. Not against Target, but it's all manufactured, and I just think there's such a valuable treasure when we've made something and we give it to someone special. And I was looking kind of through my closets and into my guest's bedroom, and what are some of the things that I have that have brought such meaning to me. I have back here a quilt, and so we're going to focus on some quilts today. This is a quilt, that the one and only quilt that I made. When I made this quilt, we had a log house and the guest bedroom was up in the loft, and so I definitely decorated it old world cabin, log cabin look. And so these colors are typical back 20 years ago, of what I chose for that guest bedroom. And so it's in the dusty blues and dusty pinks, which isn't really a popular color now. But I think that's the beauty about a quilt. Quilts don't have to be what's in. They definitely are a taste of the past. And I was thinking about some of the quilts that I have that are pieces of the past for me. And I'm gonna show you some of those here, but a little bit more about the one I made. I did it all wrong. I knew just enough to get into trouble, and I did. The thing I learned about making quilts, and I guess the reason why I only made one, is you have to have a room. Unless you're going outside the home and into somebody else's larger area, you have to have a room to have not only all of the sewing machine and everything set up, but when you go to quilt it, there's a frame, and you don't want to take that frame up and down. Once that quilt is on the frame for the quilting, you leave it up. And when I made this, I had that space. I did all hand quilt all of this. I have to say I am rather proud of that part of it. But I know some of the things that I didn't do them right. But it was a memory for me. I don't know who's going to end up with it or if anybody will want it at some point in time. But for me, I put a lot of time into this quilt with hand quilting it. And it's relatively square. I mean, not square, it's oblong. But from that perspective, I think I did an okay job. I would totally do the binding around the edges a little differently, but it's what I knew, and I did it, and I completed it. That was the big thing, as I completed it. And but after I made it, I decided, I think there's other crafts and things that I enjoy doing more than quilting. My sister is the quilter, and I don't really know if she's done too much in making bed-size quilt, but she's done a tremendous amount of wall hangings, and she's going to be coming. Donna is going to be coming in a few weeks, and I'll be doing another little video with her. That's always kind of fun, and I think we will be talking about some of her quilts that she's made. Well, over the years, I have acquired some quilts, a couple of quilts actually, from that had been in the little house that we moved into when I was a little girl, and they had been my great grandmother's and totally wore out, but we used them, and we were probably the ones that finished wearing them out, and just really they were shredded. The tops were worn, and I didn't want to get rid of them, but I thought, I want to do something with the memory of these old quilts. And so I put them into these pretty rustic looking teddy bears. But I know some people just make pillows, but this particular quilt was in shreds. There was not much of it to save, but I saved as big a pieces that I could to make his body and stuff him, put just simple eyes on him. And this is from one of my grandmother's old quilts. And so he sits on my guest bed, and actually on that bed I do have a quilt that we bought in one of our travels to the Amish country. We've seen beautiful quilts back there. It's just fun to go into the quilt shops and look at the many, many, many different designs. I think that's one of the things that intrigued me. I love this one because of the old fabrics. I mean, these these are terrific and just fun. So that's one way to save an old quilt. Now I made another teddy bear out of another quilt that literally, this quilt is truly worn through. The back of the ear here, the wool, I can see it's matted wool, and it's worn out. Very delicate, lots of holes in him. But you know, that just says to me that these old quilts got a lot of use. Now, I haven't even put eyes on him yet. I could put eyes on him. Maybe one of these days I'll put eyes on him. He's got a big hole here in his tummy. But he tells a story, and I just thought it would be such a shame to, even though this quilt, you wouldn't use it on a bed anymore, but just such a shame to throw it out. So there again, this one found its way into another teddy bear. And I just, you know, we don't know the story, right? Just think of all the people that would have used this over the years. And if this teddy bear could talk and tell you about his coat, I'm sure there's lots of stories in there. But I just thought this was a really fun way to kind of keep that memory going. And it was my great-grandmother's. And so these quilts, she was way up in her 90s someplace when she passed away. I think she passed away before I was even born. So that was 77 years ago. And she had 12 children. And so who knows if all of those 12 children used this quilt, but possible. And she lived up the Columbia Gorge, Skamania. And so there's, if these quilts could talk. So I think they deserved to be restored and retained best way possible. Now there's another quilt here in my little guest chair that was also in the house that was hers that we moved into. This is very, very unique. This one too has been through the war, several, in that it's been used hard. In fact, it's hard to even find one of these motifs that's all intact. These are worn through. The fabric is just totally gone. But all of these little, I'm going to hold it up close to the camera here in a minute. There's all this fancy, fancy stitching on every one of these. There is no machine sewing on this, or very little, I should say. At some point in time, someone put a new binding on it and a piece on the back to save it. And my mother could have been the one that did that. I don't think she did, but it's possible. But I'm going to hold this up close to see. I'll just stand up here and get it close to the camera. If you can see all the little stitches and the fancy stitching, and you can see where all the fabric is missing from some of the patches. But many, many hours in the stains, of course. I wouldn't dare try to even clean it. I just have it packed away. I don't even have this one out. But I just don't have the heart to part with it, even though it literally is worn out. But I have to say it's quite heavy. Very, very, very warm because they're wool inside. And so here again, if this quilt could talk, whoever made it, and I don't know if my great-grandmother made it. She could have. I don't know at all. And family enough is gone to, we don't have anybody to ask the questions of. But the many rows of fancy, fancy stitching. And it was sewn together originally with a machine. I can see the machine sewing. but all of this other red stitching on here is all done by hand. And when I say this is heavy, I mean, I'm gonna say, you know, it could easily be 5 pounds. I never thought about weighing it, but it's amazing. But I guess back in the day when quilts were made really out of necessity, they wanted them warm because, you know, maybe you didn't have the furnace on at night. In fact, the house that she lived in was all wood heat. So quilts were made for necessity, and now we look at them as treasured. And they're really just not so popular in a lot of people's design and decorating in homes. But, you know, there's such, I don't know, I'm just old-fashioned enough. I just love the value of what it took to put this quilt all together. And really, if you could see it in the whole, I don't know if I can get more of it out here for you to see. This design obviously is a star design, and pretty intricate, with lots and lots and lots of little pieces. So the last little quilt that I'm going to show you is really just a piece of a quilt. This quilt, my grandmother on my mother's side, her name was Hulda, and she came from Sweden when she was a little girl through Ellis Island. She made these, I don't know what she really intended for them to be, but these are made out of her outer clothing. Like, most of these pieces are wool. And she made one for, I think she made maybe 6 or 8 of them for my cousins. My mom got one, my aunt got one, and she had saved old garments that she had worn, and that's the story I remember it being told. But then she did all this fancy work, and here again, if I hold it still and up, hopefully you're getting a view of some of this fancy work that she did, and it's beautiful. I never had the heart to put it even in a frame, so I have an old rocking chair was my grandfather's rocking chair. It's an old wood rocking chair, and I just have this draped over the back, and I see it every day, and when I see it, I am reminded of my grandmother. And this is all hand sewn. There is no machine sewing. This is the back side. This is what the back side looks like. So all of these crazy blocks, I think they call it kind of a crazy quilt, all of these pieces are all hand sewn together. So none of this is sewn on the sewing machine. I can see her basting stitches, and then she's done the fancy stitches over the seam work. And her workmanship was beautiful. The colors of the garments were so dark and not very bright, but the stitching on top kind of makes them beautiful. But I treasure these things, and I just would encourage us to really think about what memories are we making and giving our own family and grandkids. I just see that, you know, times change. I get that. We do things differently now because we have the ability with, we have access to more things. We don't have to sew out of necessity. But there is such a connection when you're giving someone something that you've actually made. I think there is a piece that we've kind of missed, and I think it will eventually maybe go away. I hope not, because I think there's such value in these memories. My grandkids are going to remember, as an old lady, I decided to get on YouTube and Facebook and make silly videos. But that's okay, because hopefully along the way, maybe I'm inspiring somebody else to value what you do, value what you create. Whether it's baking a dessert, might be sewing, might be knitting, might be crochet, might be your yard work, might be the garden that you create every year and share tomatoes with the family. It can just be anything. It doesn't have to be handwork, but I think, keep looking and finding those things that you can make memories with your children. We're in such an upside down world these days, and as all of us have seen bits and pieces of what's gone on in Afghanistan, and I'm not going to talk politically about any of that, but I did hear a piece about how many orphan children are left that are on the streets, and that's heartbreaking. And I think about those children, and they don't have somebody they maybe don't have a grandparent or a parent, obviously, to give into their life. And so let's treasure the treasures we have and take advantage of the fact that, maybe you have neighbor children that you do things for. If you don't have somebody that you do something for, find somebody. Everybody loves to be remembered and given a little something, just to know that somebody sees them. And may sound like a little thing, but it might be a huge thing in somebody else's life. And if we have grandkids, nieces, nephews, acquaintances, friends, what a treasure, what a value. I brought over in this room for me to show you one last little thing of a memory. This was my grandma's wooden bucket. Somebody may know exactly what it was used for in the day. And this is a lot of years old. It was on their family farm, and I don't know what it was used for. But I remember it being at my grandma's house, and it was filled with buttons inside. Well, my mom got it from her mom, and I've gotten it now from my mom. Mom and Dad never put buttons in it. I can remember going to my Grandma Smith's house and taking out handfuls of her buttons and just sorting them and looking at them. They were all so different, but what sweet, fond memories of sitting on the floor in her house in Dallas, Oregon, and just going through her buttons and looking at them. And I loved that. It was just a precious memory. Well, my mom and dad were rock hounds, and so they put rocks in here, and we have all kinds of, I don't know, this might be a quartz. I'm not a rock person. But this morning when I opened it up, thinking about bringing it in here to show, actually the first rock I picked up was this funny little brown thing, and I noticed it's got a little message on it. And it says, "Petrified wood, Badlands, South Dakota." I recognize the writing. That's my mom's writing. And so obviously they went all over and picked up rock. And I just thought, well, isn't that a great little memory? My mom wrote that on there so somebody wouldn't just think it was a plain old rock. It's actually petrified wood. Just handfuls of all kinds of rocks. I have memories of my kids going to Grandma and Grandpa's house and getting into this bucket of rocks and taking them out like I did with the buttons and just piled them up, looked at them. I mean, they're all different colors down in here. Little rocks. They had lots of big rocks out in their garage, but this was always in the house, and all of them are just kind of fun, unique, nothing of any value, but oh my goodness, my kids, my girls, spent a lot of time looking at these rocks. And I know for a fact my granddaughters did the same. I don't know if they remember that, but I remember them because I had it out at my house. And they would sit on the floor and just go through and look at all the pretty rocks. And that may seem like a simple memory, but it's a bonding memory. And I just think, you know, we're so separated nowadays because of COVID, and we get to spend less and less time together. So when we do get together, we value that. And I hope we're able to make time in the midst of all of this craziness to keep memories going, keep finding things to let your family, let your grandkids, let your neighbor kids know that you see them, you care for them, and just building into their character value for things that are made by hand and treasured by you. So that's my thought for the day. You know, I think as you've heard me say before, we're all created by design, and I think we were created to design and create. And so it makes me feel like there is a way to connect. It's not always by the telephone. We love that. But just leaving things for our family to find and discover and take out every so often and look at the old quilts that we maybe remember as a kid, or whatever you decide to do. I shared, I think last time, episode that we're working on a new cookbook for our family. And that's just another way to help make connection, make bonding, value that treasure that we have, that freedom that we have to be able to connect and spend time with one another, even when it is in the hard times and it's hard to get together. But we can make it happen. We can be safe for one another. So there you go. That's my thought for today. And bless you. And we'll see you probably in a couple of weeks. So hit like, share, invite your friends. I am still going to keep encouraging you to share your ideas. What do you do in your family to make memories? What specific? Maybe you have some quilts that you've had tucked away and want to know what to do with them. I hope someday my granddaughters will want one of these teddy bears, and I'd love to be able to give one to them. So there you go. Enjoy your day. See you next time. Bye now.